Some people ask why I felt marginalized and ridiculed for owning a Chinese EV in my last video. Well, all you need to do to get an idea why is to read the 400 plus comments in that video. Yes, some of them are objective and factual in their disagreement with me, but quite a few were just outright senseless rebuttals, borderline bullying, and even personal threats. I'm not a car reviewer, nor was that video and the video before that sponsored by BYD or any dealers. So you can say that those comments did make me feel kind of disappointed when I was reading them. In fact, I was questioning if the intention of that video, which was to provide my personal insights to why more and more drivers are buying EVs now, well, was this intention wrong? And so, between wanting to do a tit-for-tat rebuttal video for those troll comments and continuing to present facts from an actual EV owner, I chose to do this video. Yes, I debunked a few myths of owning EVs in the previous video, so in this one, let me try to balance the scales by sharing my personal peeves or disadvantages of owning an EV, if you will. Yes, I'm going to talk bad about EVs, particularly this BYD Seal that I own. But do stay tuned all the way to the end because there is a revelation that all the viewers who adversely commented to my video would want to watch. Again, if you're wondering, this video isn't sponsored, certainly not by Anson. If you know, you know. So after driving the BYD Seal for a little over 6 months now, I can safely say that I've experienced quite a bit of what this car can offer. But beyond the characteristics of the car itself, I've also gone through some of the quirks of EV ownership that only owners, not reviewers, would experience. Now, before I start, I need to qualify that whatever I say in this video are my opinions based on my car ownership experiences and the subjective influences those experiences have on me. Okay, with those out of the way, right? Here goes. Now, first disadvantage of owning an EV in Singapore takes place even before we drive the car out of the showroom. That is the price. Now, take for example this BYD Seal here. The OMV for it, which stands for the open market value, is $38,000. Now, in layman terms, that's the original price of the car that the dealer got it straight out from the factory. Or in the case of PIs, right, the price that they bought from overseas dealers or distributors. Now, $38,000 is considered mid-range high for cars in Singapore. This places this Seal dynamic model way above most Japanese and Korean sedans and even crossovers like the Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla, Hyundai Avante, Mazda CX-5, Kia Niro, Honda Vezel, and many more. In fact, some of the more premium Continentals like the Volvo XC60s and Audi A6 have OMVs that are lower than the Seal. So EVs really come at a premium. And for this Seal, right, the price of the OMV is closer to that of a BMW 3 Series or even a Mercedes C-Class. However, there's a caveat here and many car owners still don't know about this. I'm referring to the EV early adoption incentive that our government gives. Coupled with the enhanced VES rebate, most, if not all EVs, are looking at an upfront $40,000 discount off the sticker price, which means for many lower to mid-tier EVs like up to this BYD Seal, the price we pay to drive it out of the showroom will be lower than many other petrol cars. Even many hybrid cars of similar OMVs. So, at this point, you might argue and ask, is this higher OMV a real disadvantage of EV ownership? Well, it isn't, until we sell the car a number of years later. I'll come to the resale value later. Next, another big hurdle of EV ownership is the charging time. Now, we don't talk about the newest EVs with swappable batteries from NIO or those that have the golden battery technology from Zeekr. Let's only talk about what we have today, taking my BYD Seal here as an example. So this car has a maximum charging rate of 110 kilowatt. Now, with only a 61 kilowatt hour battery, the theoretical time to charge from 0% state of charge to 100% would be about 33 minutes. But in the real world, right, this would never happen. I've never tried charging from 0% before, but I can personally vouch that with a 180 kilowatt DC charger like this one, I've clocked 10% to 100% in 44 minutes. This isn't slow by EV standards, but to ICE car owners, this is embarrassing. And I get it, because with my other petrol SUV, right, even with a 60-litre tank, it would probably take at most like 5 minutes to pump to a full tank and leave. And so, not surprisingly, so many of the comments that I got from the previous video is about the inconvenience of charging. More so, some others also added that there's not enough chargers to serve all the EVs today in malls, let alone in 2030 when all cars here are EV. I'm not going to address that point. I'll just discuss about the speed of charging. And yes, I cannot disagree that charging is way slower than pumping petrol. Therefore, there is going to be a need to change our ownership habits from that of a purposeful pump to that of a charge when able. What I mean is this. Now, for EV owners who drive around thinking that they have to purposely go pump up their batteries, right? Yes, this 40 plus minutes of wait will be unproductive. So there's a need to change our lifestyle to that of charging when convenient. Meaning, when we drive to a mall to buy groceries or have lunch, charge the car. When there is a charger at our workplace, right, charge the car. Even if we are going to a park on a Sunday morning for a 2-hour stroll, charge the car. With AC chargers, an hour or two won't really fill the tank full, but with frequent charge when able lifestyle patterns like this, which, to be honest, is impossible when I drive my petrol car, the charging time dilemma will be a thing of the past. But I'd like to address one more point, and that's the type of residence that we are in. Now, for landed owners, right, you have the best case scenario for EV ownership. Not only is it going to be convenient for you, charging is going to be so much cheaper. For HDB dwellers, it isn't too bad with something like 1 in 3 car parks installed with chargers. Sure, they are not DC chargers, but you have the option of leaving your car to charge overnight at the AC charger. And even if you don't have a charger at your car park, right, chances are there's going to be one within 10 minutes of walk away. But condo owners will be the real drag if you don't have chargers in your car park. Because I bet there will be many of you who won't want to park overnight at a neighboring HDB MSCP because of security or worse, status. So your only place to charge is at the workplace or at a mall. Now, take it from me, I felt the same way because my condo didn't have chargers yet. On to the third disadvantage now, and this might be trivial, but it absolutely irks me. Now, I'm talking about the full touchscreen interface. I really miss actual buttons for aircon control and even for something as simple as the rear demister. Now, in this Seal, at the fastest, I got to pull down a menu on the screen like this and click on the demister icon and then press the back icon to go back to where I was. But controlling the aircon is as bad with 3 or more clicks to achieve the temperature or fan speed that I want. Now, sure, there are shortcuts using 3-finger swipes like this, but I still cannot remember the difference from a horizontal swipe to a vertical one and which direction is which. And if you are saying there are voice commands, right? Hi BYD, turn on the rear demister.
Okay, turning on rear defrost.
Well, I feel that they are just too slow. So back to the touchscreen. This can sound funny to you, but I belong to the group who absolutely cannot stand fingerprint marks on the screen. So it takes incredible patience for me to control my OCD when my wife leaves fingerprints, even her makeup residue sometimes, on the screen after she drives. But am I an oddball? I don't believe I'm the only one who's bothered with fingerprint smudges on the infotainment screen, right? Let me know in the comments below, okay? And while you're at it, do like this video if you haven't, and make sure that you're subscribed so that you get to watch future videos like this one. I mean, YouTube tells me that 99% of you who watch my previous videos weren't subscribed. Aside from charging inconveniences, there's another con that is a big disadvantage to me, and that's driving an EV for road trips. Now, for context, prior to COVID, I drove on road trips with my family in Malaysia at least twice a year. I've driven to Penang at the furthest and for a 10-day trip around the peninsula at the longest, clocking easily more than 2,000 kilometers for some trips. Now, in my petrol cars then, the thought of stopping to refuel never crossed my mind. But in an EV, right, doing a road trip isn't going to be as straightforward. And in some instances, might be even impossible. Now, let's take a simple weekend trip from Singapore to KL as a case study. And in a petrol car like this one here, right, with a full tank, we probably only need to refuel when we reach KL. And when the fun is over, pump 1 or 2 more times to reach home. I'm not so sure if that's possible in an EV, at least for my Seal. While the charging network in Singapore is very reliable, I've seen many chargers being unserviceable in Malaysia, and they don't have as many as we have. So potentially at a popular R&R stop, the worst case scenario is that all the chargers there are spoilt or occupied. And at the best case scenario, right, it is a 30-minute downtime for a 20 to 80% charge as opposed to a 5-minute petrol fuel up. So for me, unless I'm stopping for lunch, that 30-minute break at the R&R is time lost at the destination. So for this reason, I'm not an advocate for EV road trips. In fact, while I look forward to trying one, maybe to KL, I will only do that to prove a point. The anxiety I and the family will have along the way will definitely be a mood killer. Now, I still prefer to do road trips in a petrol car like this one anytime. Now, very related to the previous point, which is a big disadvantage for EVs, is driving at high speeds. Now, like all ICE cars, there is a sweet spot in terms of speed to maximize fuel or battery efficiency. Now, in many ICE cars like this one, the speed is around 70 kilometers to about 100 kilometers per hour, depending largely on the number of gears the car has and the gears ratio. Now, in EVs, certainly in my BYD, the most efficient fast speed seems to be around 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. At this speed, battery consumption is around 12 to 15 kilowatt, depending on the weight in the cabin. But when I drive at higher speeds, for instance at 110 kilometers per hour, the power consumption rises to 16 to 20 kilowatts. Now, compared to an ICE car, EVs certainly don't like to be driven fast, at least when it comes to consumption. A few weeks back, in a Facebook group, I saw a post where someone was asking how many charging stops does he need if he drives to KL at 180 kilometers per hour in an Atto 3. Firstly, don't drive at 180. Call me naggy, but this is really dangerous, not only to yourself, but other road users. But as importantly, right, at this speed, I reckon consumption will be perhaps in the 30 kilowatt range, maybe more. So the battery range will effectively be half, maybe even worse than that. Now that's why my wife mainly uses the Seal to fetch the kids. And EV actually is more suited for start-stop type of driving, especially when compared to an ICE car like this one. But at high speed, right, I'm certain a petrol car has more range and can maybe be more economical even. In any case, let's move on to a more serious disadvantage, and that's the road tax and insurance. Yes, these are more expensive than if you own an ICE car. Now, just to give you a context on my road tax on the BYD Seal Dynamic, right? So, for 6 months, it is $751. Now, it's slightly higher than a 2-litre ICE car. In fact, for the more affordable Atto 3, the road tax is this high too. But let me share how absurd the road tax is for the performance model of the Seal. You know, the one that does 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds? Whoa, it is $2,800 for 6 months, you know. Now, in the car's lifetime, you would have paid $56,000 just to put this car on the road. Now, that's the price of another car actually, minus the COE, of course. This is really something I think is unfair to EV owners. Yes, I sort of get the $700 of additional premium in our annual road tax because we don't pay for fuel tax. But charging road tax by power output is absolutely rubbish. Now, there are 3-litre turbo ICE cars that can be considered with supercar performance, but their road tax is less than half of that, $5,600, right, for the Seal performance model. So really, I think this is a big unfair punishment for many EV owners, especially those who drive the more mass market tiers. Oh, there's insurance too. The insurance that I'm paying is at $1,300 plus, if I remember correctly. Now, this is nearly double of what I paid for my Mercedes GLC. I understand that EVs are more costly to repair and the chances of a complete write-off is higher, but at double the cost of a more expensive petrol car? Now, I hope this higher premium is because of the current gestation period of the EVs on the road, and in 1 or 2 years' time, we can get better rates, because we'll continue to be tied in to the small selection of insurers with markups due to the warranty of the car. So far, we've tackled most of the more common disadvantages of owning an EV. I've saved the most talked about one for the last. In the 400 plus comments in my previous video, the majority of anti-EV advocates broach on this point. Yes, we are talking about the resale value. So how much of a disadvantage is this point? Now, first of all, we don't have actual figures to compare 8 to 9-year-old EVs here in Singapore because the majority of privately owned EVs are not more than 3 years old yet. I mean, we have to exclude those oddball EVs like the Nissan Leaf from 10 years before, and also the BYD E6, which were mostly registered as PHVs. So they have terribly high owner counts and mileage. And surely we cannot reference resale values figures from other countries because quite a number of them have crazy depreciation value even, especially within the first 1 to 3 years. So what we can do is to compare the real data here in Singapore. And so I went to scrape figures from SG Carmart. So let us analyze a few case studies, starting from the BYD Atto 3, which has been sold since 2022. Now, a search on the internet suggests that the Atto 3 was introduced at a launch price of $178,000 in Q3 2022. Today, that car is priced at $135,000 on the market. And let's say that the dealer eats $10,000 off the value, which means the owner sold it at $125,000. So now, the owner actually lost $53,000 in 2.5 years, or around 30% from the original price he paid. Now, let's compare a hybrid car now, which I will use the Mazda CX-5 here because they seem to be at around the same category. Again, a search on the internet reveals that the price of these cars in Q3 2022, right, is quite similar to that of the Atto 3, which is around $178,000 too. So in SG Carmart, I found this one here from September 2022 asking for $133,000. Now supposedly the dealer also buys the car in at 10K below, right? So this Mazda owner lost $55,000 in the same 2.5 years. Now this worked out to be around 31% loss in the same period. Now let's go for one more car, and this time round a petrol SUV. Again at around the same price of $178,000 in mid-2022. We have the Peugeot 5008. And I found this one advertising at $120,000. Since this is slightly older at around 2.7 years old, right, the owner lost $68,000 if again we assume that the dealer got it at 10K below the asking price. This loss is more substantial at 38%. And if you want even more comparisons, I have found this more upmarket BMW 216 Grand Tourer from around the same period. Now the loss for the owner for this one is significant, from $204,000 in Q3 of 2022 to just $119,000, presumably offered by the dealer. So making him lose about 42% in the same 2.5 year periods. Now, of course, if you are to dig, right, there will always be cars that buck the trend. For instance, the Honda Vezel and the Mercedes-Benz GLC, which would have lost only about 15% and 13% respectively of their value. And of course, I mean, there are also so many other factors at play when it comes to resale value, like the car COE and path at the time of registration, the condition of the car at the time of sales, and even if you know how to negotiate with the dealer. But having sold, scrapped, and exported like 17 cars myself since, with all the conditions being equal, right, I think the resale value really boils down mainly to these three factors. Now, number one, the initial price that you paid for your car. Number two, the period when you sell it, which is highly dependent on the COE price at that month. And number three, the car model itself, which determines the demand in the market. So a model like the BYD Atto 3, right, wouldn't lose much more in resale value today as compared to many ICE cars or hybrid cars out there, considering how popular the Atto 3 is on the road now. But if we are to sell a Dongfeng box, for example, in 2.5 years' time, which I don't think will be a very popular model here, I reckon that its resale value will be a lot lower. So yes, EV resale value won't be good, but it's probably not the worst compared to some ICE models. And if the argument is that EV value will drop further down the road, right? Well, I don't have a crystal ball to foresee the market here in Singapore in 2028. But if you have one, feel free to factually share your predictions. Just don't do that after watching a propaganda video against China. So there you go. There are so many disadvantages of EVs that will put off some drivers, especially those who don't believe in one in the first place. But we need to be objective here. Every car model on the road has their advantages and disadvantages. Now at the lower end, a Kia Picanto may be economical to buy and maintain, but if you watch its crash test video, you'll know you're gambling with your life if someone T-bones you. At the higher end, a Mercedes G-Wagon is the epitome of luxury and style, but at what cost? I mean, at a depreciation of nearly $100,000 a year, is it worth it? Now my point is this. Many people in Singapore buy cars rarely with their heads. Now, it's true for those viewers who commented that for a $200,000 for BYD, right, it makes little sense to buy one. But the same is true for all cars, any car in Singapore. It makes little to no sense to own a car in Singapore with our excellent public transport. And car sharing is everywhere too if you must drive. So when we buy cars, it's seldom from a place of logic. Most of us, we purchase a car with our hearts and justifying it later with logic, especially when justifying it to the wife. Because honestly, if everybody opts for a car based on a logically head decision, right, we probably see a sea of Corollas or Vezzels on the road. No offense to Corolla and Vezel owners. Yes, EVs are not for everyone, but that doesn't mean that people who bought EVs are wrong and they are damned. Worse so, why do people wish to see EV drivers suffer for their perceived mistakes? It's like HDB dwellers dissing on condo owners, or chicken rice lovers saying that people who eat duck rice are wrong. Or in my profession, right, Canon camera advocates fighting with Sony users to justify who has a better camera system. Now, these are not the best metaphors, but you get the drift. Just because charging an EV is not as convenient as filling up petrol in an ICE car, right, it doesn't mean that owning an EV is wrong. Or even if the resale value of some EVs are lower, it doesn't mean that EV ownership is a mistake. Or maybe because you don't like China or Chinese people, right, then all Chinese EVs must be dangerous and the batteries will kill the owners if they catch fire. And the absolute worst one for me, right, because other people can afford to buy an EV, then they have to be lackeys who work for the government or sponsored by companies. Come on. I mean, what has it got to do with... My friends, don't hate people who have money. Not everyone who is richer than us, who can afford to buy a Mercedes, a BMW or Porsche, cheats other people's money. Many of them work really hard to get to where they are today. Yes, some of them have rich parents, but even if I hate them because my parents are poor, right, will I become richer? So if I don't agree with EVs, I'll just state my views that I don't agree and present my case. I wouldn't go around calling EV owners idiots or retards simply because I don't like EVs. For the record, I make these videos not because I love EVs and hate ICE cars. I still enjoy driving in my other petrol car for some use cases. And again, these videos, they are not sponsored by BYD or any dealers. I can do this because I run a video production company. So anyway, my point is this. If a dealer is to sponsor me a nice ICE car ride, I wouldn't reject that as much as I would say no to an unsafe, uncomfortable EV. The point I'm making here is at least we should be open to things that are different. And an EV, after more than 100 years of having only petrol cars on the road, is going to be different. And going forward, right, like it or not, Singapore is going to cease the registration of new ICE cars by 2030. So if you still hate EVs and all the derivatives of EVs by then still, right, what will you do?